Hello, Triratna Buddhist order. And Namo Buddhaya Jai Bhim. Okay, this is fantastic. It's so lovely to be here. This is my very first Wymondham convention, my very first combined convention. So great to be here. And I just want to talk personally, really, about the themes that we've already been exploring so far today. So basically, I agree with everything said so far. This is more going to be an exploration from my personal take. But before that, I want to say just how proud I am to be here. Actually, just how proud I am to be a member of this order. How proud and grateful I am to all those people who, in the past, have made someone like me possible. Actually, because it makes it possible for someone like me to come along and encounter a systematic, clear, inspiring presentation of the Dharma. I just think that's such a gift. So grateful for that. I'm also very proud to consider myself a disciple of Sangharakshita. He's a man who I just deeply respect. And it's to him, actually, that I'm going to turn in my reflections now. So I'm going to go back to what is considered a kind of legend in the Triratna community. So I believe it was in a basement in Monmouth Street about 50 years ago. I wasn't there, well, not in this life sakura what I've often heard people talk about in that setting of the basement of Sakura on Monmouth Street is how Bhante talked into existence the order and movement. And it's become a bit of a truism in some ways that's what Bhante did. But as with many truisms, I think there's a kernel of truth within it. And I think basically it's conditionality. It's conditionality 101. The idea that what we think about, what we ponder upon, what we talk about becomes the inclination of our minds. That's pretty much what the Buddha says in the Vajratara Sutta. And I think likewise with our order and movement. The stories we tell ourselves, the narratives we use to talk about ourselves, both between ourselves and also to the wider world, well, in a way we inherit the order we talk about. We inherit that movement that we talk about. And I think Bhante saw that. I think one of Bhante's real elements of genius in his approach is recognising quite how significant the way we talk about ourselves can be. So fast forwarding 50 or so years, I am the Triratna Young Buddhist Coordinator for the UK, Ireland and mainland Europe. I can't quite fit that on my name badge. So it's my job, in a sense, to think about the future, to dream about the future, to talk with other people who are going to be living into the future, decades to come. And a question I often hear, this is probably from the older generations, a question I often encounter is, how do we get more young people along? How do we get more young people involved? What I find is that when I probe a bit more deeply into that question, I discover a view. And it's what I'm going to say now is a bit of a caricature, but I think elements of it have been already voiced even in the last few days. So that the story is something like this. The order is in decline. We're all getting older, we're dying off. We need young people, or we're doomed. That's pretty much the narrative. Does anyone else find that scary? So I think, I'll just unpack why I disagree with this view. Right, so firstly, I think it's deeply unattractive. Basically, I don't think anyone would want to join something which thinks of itself as in decline, you know. But more seriously, I think it's unhelpful. And I think this particularly with a mind to those young people who are coming along for the first time to our centres. You know, if we have this view, however tacitly in our minds, well, actually that is felt by young people coming along. You know, they feel that sense of kind of projection onto them that they'll save this order, this movement. Which is quite a burden to bear. Yeah? And it's too much of a burden for someone who actually doesn't even really know what they're signing up to yet. So it's unattractive, it's unhelpful, and in my view, it's untrue. So I became a mitra in 2011. I asked for ordination the same year. And since then, what I found actually is an order which is, it's increasingly confident, which has something which has already been described this morning, something of inestimable value to give to the world. As I say, this sort of system of clear, inspiring teachings. I mean, even since I was ordained 2 years ago, there have been something like 5 or 6 Buddhist centres started. 5 or 6 Buddhist centres have been built. Our numbers have moved over the 2,000 threshold, which I think is something to be celebrated. And we have other projects like Vajratara, which I've not been to yet. I'd really like to go to. But even watching it on a small window on my laptop, I just think that's so inspiring. You know, the vision that's behind that of Western Buddhist architecture and the vision of fundraising, which has made that possible. I just think, wow, you know, this is something which is moving in a positive direction. This is something which is really growing. And I think increasingly as people come along, young people and people of all ages come along, that's what they're encountering in us. And I think it's a little bit confusing when we start to hear this story that, we're in decline. You know, it just doesn't make sense. So I wanted to just talk about a couple of myths which Bhante has put forward that I find particularly inspiring, and I think which, in a way, are the answers to the question, how can we get more young Buddhists? You know, how can we get more young people coming along? So firstly, there's the myth of the higher evolution. Yeah, so this idea that from beginningless time we have developed, or life has developed in such a way as to bring us to this crucial juncture at which it's possible to choose to manifest the unimaginable, the inconceivable. I also really like the Sutra of Golden Light. It's a sutra I find myself coming back to again and again. And here you have, individuals with all their stuff, society, all the facets of human society, and the very fabric of the cosmos aligning itself in accordance with the transcendental golden light of the Buddhas. You know, I just think, wow. You know, this is the sort of vision that Bhante had. This is the sort of vision that Bhante continues to have. And to me, it's no surprise that there were so many young people around when he was talking in these terms. Yeah, this is inspiring to me. And what I also notice is that where these kinds of myths are present today, there you find lots of young people. But I don't think it's a question of merely changing our rhetoric or, PR. I think there's something much more fundamental going on here. I think it's a question, one of the questions I would ask is, what's the biggest vision for this order and movement that you can hold? What's the biggest vision that we can, we can maintain in our tiny minds before they buckle and burst into thousands of pieces? And from that, how can we find new, fresh, creative, exciting ways to express that vision? I think this is the way forward. This is one of the ways that I see what I do as contributing to. I find it really exciting. I hope that's coming across. And it's interesting. So I'll say a little bit about what I consider to be one of the really important parts of that picture, which, as Vajratara and Yashosagar have already said this morning, is teams of people living collectively, working collectively, communities operating as nuclei of the new society. I find that interesting because I'm not doing that. I live in a flat in central Oxford. It's a very nice flat. I live with my partner. She's lovely. She's recently become a mitra. I do a couple of evenings for the nascent Oxford Buddhist Centre. And I work for the development team. I work for the development team of the European Chairs Assembly. And I sort of feel, actually, I'm doing my bit. But at the same time, there is this tension for me, this desire to want to engage in these more total situations. And I don't quite know how to get there, if I'm completely honest. I don't know how whether it's possible for me to make this transition. Perhaps I'm not the only one. In my very worst moments, I think to myself, well, maybe it's something the 20-somethings will do, you know. Leave it to the younger people. But at the same time, actually, I can do better than that. You know, we can do better than that. In some ways, I think it's indicative of a much wider societal trend, which is basically sort of palming off the hard work onto the next generations, which isn't good enough. It's not good enough from my perspective. But more fundamentally for me is this little voice which continues to make itself present in my life, which is that my life is not my own. Do other people feel that as well? There's this small voice that sometimes I can hear it, sometimes I can even listen to it, but I think acting on it is, well, I think it's a fruition of practice. I think for me, it's a question of maturity and maturing as a dharmachari. I don't know what this process is going to look like. I feel like within this order, I have the tools, I have the friendships, I have the blessing to be able to effect this transformation for myself. But I really don't know what the other side of that transformation looks like. I'm not sure I can. But I do have confidence that what we have as an order is what is necessary to be able to overcome that. I think one of the major things we have to offer is a path towards a joyful renunciation of personal preference. And I think, boy, do we need that at the moment. Often the rhetoric around climate change is quite joyless. Sometimes it's almost as though we've got to give up everything we enjoy in order for things to maybe not be quite as bad as they could be. But what we have, what Bhante describes as this walking paradox of the Bodhisattva, we have a path that leads in that direction. And I have confidence in myself that I can lead that, I can walk that path. I have confidence that as an order, we can do that collectively and we can exemplify that. And in fact, that we can lead this 21st century and beyond to making manifest in the world that ideal. Thank you for listening.